I read 4 biographies this year, and they are all on English writers, but 3 of them were on the Romantic poets, and one of them was on Jane Austen. And if you don't know anything about the Romantic poets, basically Romantic poets, it's on romanticism, not romance. And romanticism, I could go on a whole spiel because it's been my biggest obsession. The first wave of Romantic poets was Wordsworth and Coleridge, and they really focused on writing nature poetry and seeking out something beyond themselves in nature. Like, I'll point, there's a painting right there, I'll show you on the screen, I'll add it. That is the biggest example of romanticism, and just man looking out at nature for something beyond himself. Oftentimes reaching for God or a spirituality of some kind. And man is not the point. It's what is beyond man that is the point. And trying to find something greater than yourself, whether it be nature, God, or just your fellow neighbor. That is very much what the first wave of Romanticism is about. And then we get the second wave of Romanticism, which is Percy Bysshe Shelley, Lord Byron, Mary Shelley, John Keats. And that one is still trying to seek something beyond yourself, but it kind of bleeds into Gothic. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, which is a Gothic novel. Percy Bysshe Shelley wrote a lot of Gothic poetry. They were inspired by Coleridge, who although he was a first wave romantic, he technically wrote a poem that started Gothic literature. Like, it helped spur that on. So the second wave is very Gothic centered, even though it is still romanticism. It's like dark romance. It's very more self-centered and more emotional based, while it still is reaching out into nature for something beyond yourself, but more so with a centered focus on like me, rather than seeking something beyond yourself. It's more like seeking yourself out in nature. And then we get on into like American romanticism with like Edgar Allan Poe is a dark romantic American, and then there's Emerson, who's not a dark romantic but a romantic, and people like confuse them all, but Emerson and Poe came later. It started with the German romantics, and then it came to the English romantics, and then it went to American romantics. Anyways, I could go into it so much because I'm a nerd, but of all the biographies I read, my favorite biography was The Friendship, Wordsworth and Coleridge by Adam Seisman. This book has been out of print for 4 years, and I looked for it for a long time, like a year and a half. But I found out that they were friends. Wordsworth and Coleridge were friends, and they founded English Romanticism. But every time I would hear about them in a class, everyone would talk about how they're rivals. But I had one teacher in high school mention that they were originally best friends. And I'm like, so what happened? Like, I'm invested. I need a biography that tells me what happened. But all the biographies were on their later life and like why each of them suck. Like, either people hate Wordsworth and love Coleridge, or hate Coleridge and love Wordsworth. Like, no one would talk about them both like unbiased. And I thought that was weird because they were once friends. And obviously when they first wrote Lyrical Ballads, which I read this year, they wrote it together and they wrote it with friendship. And shouldn't we look at writing through a lens, like autobiographically? Like, we should study writing with the original writer's intent in mind. Like, what were they originally doing and what was the original intent? Why do we focus on Wordsworth and Coleridge after they fell out with each other? Why don't we focus on that bond that founded a world-changing literary movement? Why do we just erase that? And so I looked far and wide because this was the only biography that talked about their friendship, the only one. And I literally went to LA I'm not from LA, but I was going to school more north, and I went to LA, could not find it. I went to New York City, guys, to New York City. And I was like, God, if it's not in this bookstore, it's probably not in any bookstore, and I won't try to get it. Because I tried to buy it online a while back. I got it full of like mold and like, it was just like gross stuff. I don't know what it was, but there was like something chewed on in there. Like, it was gross. It was so spotted that I just couldn't fix it. And so I was like, if it's not in this bookshop, it's not meant to be. I went in, and there was one copy in the basement of the Strand in New York City. And this was the one, and also happened to be the coolest cover, so thank you, God, for being so kind. But I loved it because I have stuff bookmarked. I didn't write in it because this book's out of print, so I had a leather brown journal that I took a bunch of notes on. I sobbed like a baby reading this, and it was just told so beautifully. And it starts with Wordsworth, and then it goes, and it will like kind of mention Coleridge because it starts with Wordsworth because he's the older one, and then Coleridge starts to sprinkle his way in, and they almost cross paths several times. And then when they finally meet, you're like, whoa, like it's Avengers Endgame. Seisman makes you really want to root for both of them. And then there gets to a point where you're like, they're so obsessed with each other that it's unhealthy, and they're kind of tearing each other apart without realizing it, because Wordsworth is this nobody and Coleridge is everybody. Like, everyone knows Coleridge, everyone loves Coleridge, and no one knows Wordsworth, which you probably know Wordsworth and you probably don't know Coleridge, right? Right? Isn't that interesting? And then you find out that Wordsworth meets Coleridge, and Coleridge reads what he writes, and he's like, you are the best writer I have ever met. How does nobody know who you are? I want to be your friend, and we should write together, and I want to show you, like, to everybody. I want everyone to know how cool you are. You're going to be known if it's the last thing I ever do. And Wordsworth is, like, introverted and awkward, and he's like, no, it's okay. And Coleridge is, like, a yappy, like, extrovert who's like, no, I'm adopting you, and everyone needs to know how cool you are. Wordsworth keeps having all these failures, and Coleridge has a lot of failures too, but he has more successes than Wordsworth. And Wordsworth is older, and he's like, maybe it's not meant to be. Maybe I should give up on writing. And Coleridge is like, no, you have this gift, like, you can't give up on it, because, like, I believe in you. And Wordsworth's sister, she's also a big component in this. She's like, I believe in you too. And so he has these two people, and they go and they stay at a cottage for a year, and they write their most profound known poems. Like, the poems that you probably know by them were written during that first year together, which is actually the book I'm reading right now is on them, because I'm really obsessed with them, and it's on that first year in particular. This one goes through their whole life. Basically, it gets to a point where Wordsworth gets famous and Coleridge doesn't, and at first Coleridge is like okay with that at first, but then it gets to a point where people start being like, Wordsworth, like, why are you hanging with Coleridge? Isn't he battles with addiction. And they're like, isn't he kind of like that guy that can't really get his life in order? And you have all your stuff together. You are talented, and you look at your publications are doing well, like, you don't really need this guy. And then there's like rumors that are spread about each other by other people, and like they don't know like who said what, and they let like these people ruin their friendship and sow doubts, which at the end, like, I don't want to spoil it, but I guess it's history. They do kind of make up in the end, which is good. But there's so much time lost, and it's so sad. I'm just going on about this book because I love it so much, and I don't know if we'll ever talk about it in another video. If you want me to make a video on romanticism, let me know, because I will gladly. The part that got me the most, I was really struggling with inspiration when I picked up this book, because I had had one of my biggest writing rejections ever, and I had a lot writing on it, no pun intended, and I felt discouraged. And then this book showing that these two poets that were nobodies till they were like in their late 20s, early 30s, that had barely any money and were starving half the time, and everyone like thought they were crazy for pursuing this dream, and then they literally did something that not only changed history but like helped so many people. And it was all because they didn't give up, and they believed in themselves, and they believed in each other, and they had people that believed in them. I was torn apart because, oh my gosh, this will be the last thing I tell you, because I could not stop thinking about this. Like, I was sobbing. Like, I don't think I've sobbed this hard like in a long time. I remember having to put the book down. I was like uncontrollably sobbing and had to like leave to get water because I couldn't. And then the next day I was like talking to my dad about it for like an hour and a half, and I would bring it up all the time to my roommate too, and she was invested too. I just couldn't stop talking about it. And let me tell you what it is, because I'm going on a tangent. Basically, oh my gosh, I wrote a song about it, guys. I wrote a song about this moment because it literally tore me up that much. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It'll be on my album that comes out this September, The Gothics. Anyways, so there was this moment that happens in the biography, in history, that kind of you can pinpoint as the beginning of the end. Like, this thing happens and their friendship's never the same afterwards. And based on whose letters and diary entries you read, Wordsworth doesn't know that he said something that was so earth-shattering to Coleridge. And you look at their letters and diary entries from the time, Coleridge, he struggles with mental illness and addiction, and then this one thing, he obsesses over it. But then Wordsworth is like, oh, like, I just told him this thing, and we'll move on with our lives. But basically, for Lyrical Ballads, they had a volume 1 and a volume 2, and they were supposed to publish volume 2 because volume 1 did really well. And Wordsworth tells them like, hey, I'm going to publish it, but I just need one more poem from you. I want you to finish Christabel. And Christabel was a poem that Coleridge had been working on for a while, but he was struggling to finish it because he wrote the poem about, it's really debated, but if you look at it through an autobiographical lens, he wrote the poem about battling temptation and doing the right thing even when you don't want to, or even when it's hard. And as someone who battled with addiction, and also someone who was a Christian but like constantly came up short, he felt guilty and he felt like he couldn't truthfully finish it, but he knew that he had to for Wordsworth. So he really tried, and he wrote a second part to it, but he never wrote the third part. He literally took time off work to write this poem for Wordsworth because he knew his friend really needed this to finish their publication. And so he comes on a rainy night across the hills. He walks across the hills of the Lake District in the rain, and he's like, I got Christabel, I have it. It's not 100% finished, but the second part's done, and here it is. And Wordsworth reads it, and he's like, this is perfect. This is great, thank you. But it's too rainy for you to continue. Stay the night in our spare room, go in the morning. And the morning comes, and Wordsworth is like, I thought about it last night, and I can't publish Christabel. You didn't finish it, and I can't publish an unfinished poem. So I'm not going to publish it at all, and I'm just going to publish the volume without your poem in it. Coleridge was like, oh, okay, I understand. I respect you. Like, you're the one that's putting this together. I trust your judgment. You're such a great writer, and I love your writing so much. And if you think that putting my writing next to yours will like diminish the value of the publication, then by all means do what you think is best. But then that like wound festered where Coleridge, he writes to Godwin, Mary Shelley's father. He writes to Godwin like that he no longer is going to be a poet, and he actually stops writing poetry after that because he's like, I can't even finish Christabel for my best friend, so what's the point? Like, I'm not even a good poet. Like, I can't even write this one poem. Like, I thought I was talented, I thought I was good, but I can't do this one thing, and I let down my friend, and like, I'm not good at all. Couldn't a poet at least finish this? His whole self-esteem and his whole identity just falls apart over this poem, and he actually, because of this, this is the part that made me cry, he becomes closer to Godwin, and he starts to drift away from Wordsworth, and he's still friends with him, but there's definitely a strain there ever since that, and it's like it goes on and on and on. But he becomes closer to Godwin, and he starts going to Godwin's house and reading poems to his daughters. And Mary Shelley was one of Godwin's daughters, his favorite daughter. And so literally Coleridge read her The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and there's a story about how her stepmother didn't want her to listen to it because it was too creepy, but Coleridge was like, no, let her stay. And Mary Shelley quotes The Rime of the Ancient Mariner in Frankenstein. Not only that, but on the night that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Lord Byron, her sister Claire, and her were reading Christabel. And it's because 15 years later, Lord Byron found the unpublished poem that Coleridge wrote, gave up on poetry because of this poem, and Byron was like, you gotta publish this, dude. Like, I don't even like you that much, but this is a good frickin' poem, you gotta publish it. And so he actually helped Coleridge publish it. And Mary Shelley and Percy Bysshe Shelley and Lord Byron, they loved the poem, and it inspired Frankenstein. She read it that night, and it inspired Gothic literature. It inspired some of the greatest poets and writers of that time. A poem that he didn't even finish, a poem that he was like, this is so bad. I'm not good at writing. I'm gonna give it up forever because of this one poem. And it's like he doesn't know that like his unfinished poem will become one of the most studied poems in all of English literature. Like, he doesn't know that people will not be taking Wordsworth's long poem and breaking it down in like college level classes. They're going to be breaking down his poem. And he always wanted to write a poem that was like life-changing and world-changing, and he felt like he never did it. And he died thinking that. And it like broke my heart because I'm like, he doesn't know that like his greatest failure is actually like his greatest achievement. Little girl Mary Shelley, she like literally loved his poetry, and then her work was so inspired by him, and then that impacted so many people. I have a Frankenstein poster on my wall, and it just like broke me that he doesn't know like his one poem that he thought was so bad and like worth giving up his dreams because of would impact that many people for like years, hundreds of years to come. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's like driving me insane. So yeah, that's my favorite book. That's my favorite biography. Oh, I'm gonna ruin my makeup. But yeah, so as you can tell, I really liked the book. This was the first poet book I read, and then I read 2 more poet books, and then I read lyrical ballads, and now I'm reading another poet book, and I wrote a song about it. So like this book like changed my perspective on creativity, because it just taught me that like sometimes you don't know how God's gonna use your work. Sometimes something that you think has no potential and nobody will end up like reaching people that you never thought you could reach, and will end up impacting people in ways you never could have imagined, something that you thought was worthless. And I think that's really beautiful, and just like an inspiration and encouragement to keep creating, because you never know who your work might reach. Even if you think it's worthless, what if someone out there reads it and decides like not to end their life? Or what if someone out there reads it and they write a whole novel about it? It's just incredible, like what something like one man's junk is another man's treasure, literally. Yeah, I will say Christabel is a very dark, twisty poem, and people still debate its meaning, but I feel like when you look at it through the lens of a tortured soul, somebody that really wants to do the right thing but struggles with, first of all, I relate to Coleridge because I too am a Christian who has had rough moments in my life where you feel like you come up short. Just like reading Christabel from the perspective of somebody that wants to do the right thing for God, for their wife, for their friends, for their own health, but they keep doing the wrong thing. They keep on falling into addiction. They keep on like looking at that other woman. They keep on like letting down their friend. They keep on thinking things that they're like, this isn't a godly thing to think. This isn't a Christian thing to think. Why do I keep doing this? It's like what Paul says, I know what I should do, but I keep doing what my flesh wants. He knows that he's doing wrong and he doesn't want to, but he just can't stop. And then just reading the biography on his life and knowing all the stuff he deals with and like how he fell into it. He fell into addiction because of like a prescription, and he fell into like certain things because he was mentally ill. Historians think he had depression and anxiety and possibly bipolar disorder. It's just knowing these things about him and how he's trying so hard, but he just can't. And just reading Christabel in that perspective, and it's like this gothic fantasy poem, and you're like, whoa, this is crazy. It's like an analogy for feeling like you just can never be enough, and you always just do the wrong thing, even though you know what you should do. It's really, really insane and profound. So yeah, this was my favorite biography I've read so far this year.